Who are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about all matters related to business and professional life and our financial lives, wealth building, cash flow, all those kinds of things, economic issues included. And today is December 4th, 2024. I had to think about that for a minute. And so it's the time of year, hopefully, when you are spending some time looking back on the year that will be ending in another 3.5 weeks or so, kind of summing up how did the year go? What did I accomplish? What did I not accomplish? What could I have done better? And making some plans for the coming year. So I do that. I go through this process twice a year, actually. So in September, October, there's a Jewish holiday that even if you're not Jewish, you may have heard of, called Rosh Hashanah, which literally means head of the year, and it's the anniversary of the creation of the world, but it's a time of spiritual introspection and a time to examine relationships and that sort of thing. And so that time of year, I tend to look more at my spiritual and religious life, my relationship with God, all that kind of thing. And here, though, at the end of the secular year, December, I tend to focus more on professional and business matters and those kinds of issues. For a while, I tried doing all of this on Rosh Hashanah, but I found that the business year really operates around the calendar year. And so it was not a good way for me it caused too much separation, really. It put me out of sync with the natural business cycle. And so this is the time of year I look at all those issues. And I recommend that you separate it into two parts. So the topic for today's show is advanced goal setting. But I think before we can set goals, we have to look at what have we accomplished so far. Now, if you've never set goals before, that doesn't mean you have nothing to assess in terms of where you're at, what you've accomplished, etc. The difference is that if you've never set goals before, so your initial assessment is going to take you back, and I'm going to deal primarily with business and professional lives, although I tend to set goals of one sort or another in all facets of my life. But if this is the first time you're doing an assessment, so it's reasonable to go back to the beginning of your career, or the point at which your career maybe made a major change. Maybe you changed careers. So like me, I'm on the third phase of my professional life. I was in business basically from the time I got out of college until 2006. From 2006 until roughly 2021, I was in primarily in the Navy, although while I was in the reserves starting in 2012, I had some civilian business interests as well. And then starting in 2021, that was really when the third phase of my life began. And so, what I have many times jokingly called Kevin 3.0. So if I had never set goals, or if I had never done an assessment before, right now, I would probably go back to maybe 2021. I wouldn't go all the way back to 1986 when I first started my career. I don't think that would be productive or necessary. Now, for your individual circumstances, it may make sense for you to go back farther as you examine it. And by the way, none of these things are set in stone. So what I'm hoping to do is give you some guidelines in which to operate, so the task is not so overwhelming, and it's something that you can engage in and hopefully enjoy, in the sense of feel like you're really getting some value out of it. Okay, so if you've been in business and professional and career life for 40 years and never done an assessment before, it would be very easy to get bogged down in examining what's gone on for the previous 3 or 4 decades, whatever it's been. So I would say that go back at most 4 or 5 years in examining what your professional progress has been, rather than going back your entire career. I don't think that's fruitful, at least not in the beginning. Now, once you get used to going through this process, so then there may be some value in going back farther if you haven't been doing periodic assessments, or as part of your periodic assessments going forward, because there may be things that you did, situations that you were in, hurdles that for whatever reason you couldn't overcome, that it will be useful for you to examine as you potentially start bumping into the same types of hurdles now. Okay, so reflection on our past career and business lives is not a blame game. It's an assessment game. It's an opportunity to look at, where was I successful? Where was I not successful? Why was I successful? Why was I not successful? Not, oh, I'm lazy, I'm a bad person. I mean, those may be true. I joke with people all the time. I'm lazy. I mean, people are always surprised to hear me say that. But my sense of laziness impels me not to be lazy. It's an interesting dichotomy, right? The concern about being viewed as being lazy prevents me from actually being lazy, is really what it comes down to. You can say that's a really strange mindset, and yes, you don't want to climb inside this noggin on things like that. But those kinds of pejorative assessments of ourselves aren't particularly useful. So if we're not putting in the effort that we need to put in order to achieve our goals, that's the issue. We allowed ourselves to get distracted, or now maybe the distractions were legitimate. For example, maybe there was a health issue with a member of our family or a close friend, and we felt duty bound to help that person. And as a result, that distraction prevented us from making the kind of progress that we would like to have made. Okay, well, but still, that is it's a very legitimate distraction, as opposed to, I find myself playing online video games 5 hours a day instead of pursuing my professional goals. So, assuming your professional goal is not to be a successful online gamer, so then that kind of distraction is something that you would need to work on, because it is pulling you away from more productive use of your time. Okay, and so that's what I mean by, this isn't meant to be pejorative. It's meant to be analytical and assessing, and with a level of honesty, because without those, we can't really come to terms with how to grow professionally, how to grow in our business lives in a way that will help us, continue to, or will help us move forward. Now, having said all of that, I want to go back to this example of, distractions and legitimate distractions. So it may be that as you reflect back on your, let's say the past 5 years, for if you've never done an assessment before, and you conclude that, gosh, I've let myself get distracted, but it seems like every year or every 6 months there's another member of my family or another friend who needs my help, and there's really no one else they can turn to, and so I end up being the one elected to help them out. Okay, so that's telling you something about yourself and about the people who are surrounding you, right? Now, I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. What I'm saying is it's an important aspect of yourself to recognize. Now, I saw this uh, more often than you would think among the sailors and Marines I worked with in the Navy. Oftentimes, and it was typically among younger service members, they would come to me to talk, and they were concerned about some member of their family. This would often happen on when we were deployed. Um, they were very concerned about a sick parent or a sibling or something like that, or a spouse, of course, or a child, and it was getting in the way of their work on the ship. Okay, and we would oftentimes get into a discussion about how often this happened. Was it just happening on this deployment, or was this something that happened seemingly every time they went to sea? Okay, so if it was only happening that one time, and they were struggling with it that one time. So, for example, I had a sailor who he was a submariner, and he pulled into his sub pulled into Point Loma, where I was the chaplain for the submarine squadron there. He came to see me at the request of his chief petty officer, who was concerned that he was very underperforming. And we talked, and it turned out right before he left for deployment, his wife told him she was leaving him and wanted a divorce. Well, that's a pretty tough thing to learn a day or two before you're going to sea for the next, whatever it was, 9 months or 6 months. I don't remember what their deployment was, right? So one of the things we talked about is, was he having this problem before? And the answer is no. And by the way, I confirmed that with his chief petty officer. His chief petty officer was kind of mystified because he'd been a good sailor up until then, and all of a sudden it was like his performance was falling apart. Okay, well, so he was distracted, and I think legitimately so. It's a very difficult thing to have a marriage come apart, especially to have it dropped on you the way it was dropped on him. And so in his case, he needed to work through that situation and then get back on track toward his career goals, his career advancement. And in fact, he did. Unlike a lot of the times when someone will come to talk to me, his sub pulled back into Point Loma. I think it was a couple months later, maybe 3 months later, he came to see me, and he wanted to A, thank me, and B, he invited me to come to the ceremony where he was being advanced in rate, because of the recovery of his performance. And he was very excited about that, and he really wanted me to be there because he felt like I had helped him. By the way, what a nice thing for him to do. And his chief petty officer was extremely happy as well. He was grateful for my help, but he was also proud of the sailor who had done such a good job. So sometimes these distractions they'll be a one-off or an occasional off situation, and they put us off our game temporarily. We work through that, we get back on track, and dos vidania, as the Russians say, we go on with God. But other times, I've had sailors who, when we start talking about this issue, it turns out this happens pretty much every time they go on deployment, and even oftentimes while they're on shore. And that is saying something about how they view their priorities. Okay, so they have a fundamental disconnect in the sense of, on the one hand, they're saying they want to advance in their career. On the other hand, they want to be a very dedicated friend and caregiver, or family member and caregiver. Now, I don't know about you, but I come from a time when we were, you can do it all. That's not true. You can't do it all. We have a limited amount of time in life. We have a limited amount of time each day. There's only so many things we can do. And the more days we go without proper rest, for example, the less effective we tend to become over time in all of the things that we're doing. And so the idea that we can make our friends and family always our number one priority, both in terms of attention and time, and also have robust career development is just not the case. And to have that expectation is basically to set yourself up for unhappiness, is really what or dissatisfaction and unhappiness, because you're not going to be able to do both. And so when I talk about doing this assessment, this is one of the issues I encourage you to come to terms with. Are my large life goals working in concert, or are they working in opposition, where one keeps banging into the other, and that's why I'm stymied in making progress? Okay, again, this is not saying, oh, it's bad for you to be dedicated to your friends and family. Not at all. That's a wonderful thing. It's also not saying it's a bad thing that you're not making progress in your professional life, if that's the case. It's just the reality of the situation. Okay. In order to make goal setting useful for you, you need to assess your life, what your values are, and how you express those values in your activity, or your pursuits, as we call them in the 3 pillars of attainment. And then the goals need to grow out of that. Okay. So most of us tend to think of goals as, well, I want to make a lot of money. Okay. So my goal is to make, let's say, $100,000 in the coming year. Well, that's a fine goal to have. Does your value system support that goal? Because if you're a very devoted family member and friend, and you are oftentimes end up being the one who's taking care of people, how is that going to work when you have to dedicate the time and attention that it takes to earning a 6-figure salary? Those are very difficult. Now, by the way, if you're already earning a 6-figure salary, okay, it's easier to sustain that while turning more of your attention to family and friends. But it's almost impossible to develop a 6-figure income while at the same time being robustly engaged with time-wise in taking care of other family members. Now, I'm focusing on this particular conflict because I think it's one that really challenges our values. There are other conflicts that you will undoubtedly identify if you do an honest assessment of your life and your values vis-a-vis your goals. So again, this is not a judgment on those decisions. It's a recognition that there's a conflict there that you need to resolve before goal setting is going to have a material impact on your life. Okay. And the fact of the matter is, doing an honest assessment is the hard part. Okay. Because it requires us to come to terms with several things. One is our self-image. Okay. So if you're like me, part of my self-image is I'm someone who takes care of other people. That's important to me. Okay, as a rabbi, certainly that would speak to that. One would hope, right? But even in my professional work, I've always had this sense that I should say my non-rabbinical professional work. I've always had this sense that I have a duty to take care of my clients. Okay? Now, what that means is sometimes I'm in conflict in terms of my own professional advancement. Okay, that's why that's why I'm so familiar with this issue, right? And so one of the things I've had to work with in my own life is coming to terms with that. Okay, and really being able to see oneself honestly is difficult because sometimes the things we see about ourselves are not things we want to see. Not that they're bad. There's nothing bad with being someone who wants to take care of people. There's nothing bad about being someone who wants to be financially successful. And there's nothing bad about having that conflict, but it's hard. We want to think that we're such logical, aware people, but most of us are not, me included. Okay. So it's very difficult to come to terms with these conflicts in ourselves, okay, because we tend to, and society, I think, tends to be judgmental. Oh, conflict is bad. You shouldn't have conflict. No, first of all, that's not true. Conflict is not bad. Conflict is conflict. Some conflict is bad. Some conflict is good. Okay? Sometimes conflict is the only way to resolve a situation and be able to move on to a better, perhaps higher, more productive, closer relationship. Conflict oftentimes leads to growth. Okay? But conflict also causes pain. It can cause emotional pain. It can cause physical pain if there's an actual altercation that results from the conflict, right? So while, hopefully we can avoid physical conflict, it's better for us to come to terms with emotional conflict and really understand where am I, it turns out, fighting against myself, right? And by the way, that doesn't mean that you don't like yourself. It doesn't mean you have low self-esteem. It doesn't mean any of those things. All it means is until you uh, until you see the inner conflict, you just have, you haven't seen it before. That's all. There's lots of things that we don't notice until we notice them, right? That's just the way life is. Okay. So in doing these assessments, we want to do them in a way that we come to terms with them without being harshly judgmental, really to the extent that's possible, without being judgmental per se. Now, judging oneself and being judgmental are really two different things, because being judgmental has a negative implication to it. Judging oneself is a process we need to engage in order to really understand where we're at. Okay, so in seeing this, in seeing a conflict in our behavior, or a conflict between our values and our behavior, okay, and then judging that is indeed a conflict. All of that is good, okay? Because now it gives us the opportunity to say, okay, how do I resolve this? Okay, now, again, using my own life as an example, how did I resolve it? Well, in part, I went from a profession real estate services that was with a very client-focused practice where I was taking care of my clients in a very real way, or at least taking care of their real estate, in some cases, their larger business affairs as well, to becoming a chaplain, where I was literally, my job was to take care of other people, right? And I did that for a while. And when I left real estate, when I sold my real estate practice, I told people I'm never going back to that again. I don't want to do that. It doesn't give me the fulfillment that I want. And so my idea was I was going to be a chaplain basically for the rest of my professional career. By becoming a chaplain, now what I saw was the other side of the equation, which is okay, now I can spend all my time legitimately taking care of people, and in some cases at least knowing for sure that people were very grateful for my help, but the financial remuneration just was not there, right? And so now in this third version of myself as a professional trustee, as a professional fiduciary, I've really married both in a way that I'm required to exercise both parts of what I desire to do and be in a way that's productive for everybody, my clients, people associated with the various cases in which I'm involved, and myself. Okay. Now, it took me, into my 60s to be able to do that. Would that I had gone through this process when I was a younger man. Perhaps I would be, much more successful, much farther along, as a caring person as well as a financially successful person. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, it's all good and well. I had to learn basically on my own the value of doing these kinds of assessments. Now, I don't mean literally on my own. What I mean is, there was no class for me to take to do it. There weren't these kinds of videos around for me to watch. I've absolutely gotten counseling, mentorship, guidance from a wide variety of sources, close friends, family members, business associates, and people like Zig Ziglar, though I never met him in person. Listening to his lectures and such. All of that together has helped me come to the conclusion that I need to do these kinds of assessments periodically in order to make sure my life is not only on track, but is going along the path of growth that I wanted to have. Okay. So that's one of the things that makes these assessments difficult is we identify conflicts and we're tempted to kind of go, how could I have been so blind, or how could I have been so stupid? You weren't necessarily blind or stupid. You were looking at something else. And so, there you go. And now you can be more intentional about how you examine these issues. Okay, the other thing that makes doing these assessments difficult is sometimes we genuinely do uncover something about ourselves that we don't like. Okay, and that for sure is painful. Okay, especially if it's something that someone's been telling us about ourselves. And we've been saying, no, 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 you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's nothing like that. And then it turns out they're right. All right. So if you're, I mention this show from time to time. If you're a fan of the Big Bang Theory, there's a great episode where Penny and Leonard have gotten married, and they end up having this big fight, and they don't know. They're very upset because they're married, but they don't seem to be able to be on any kind of good footing. And at one point, Penny accuses Leonard of purposely trying to undermine their marriage. And Leonard says, no, 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 I love you, I love you. Why would I ever do that? And then during the working out of the show, Leonard actually comes to see that Penny was right, that may be part of the issue. And in a really lovely scene in the show, he goes to her and he says, it occurs to me maybe what you were saying about me is right. And he said, for as long as we've been together, I still live in constant fear that you're going to leave me, because why would a woman like you want to be with a guy like me, right? And he makes himself incredibly vulnerable. At the same time, he deals with the emotional pain of realizing that his self-image is really not in a good place with respect to being a husband, right? And you can say, oh, but that's just a TV show. Well, okay, yeah, it's a TV show. But the people who write these shows, a lot of them, and I would argue in the case of the Big Bang Theory, they're very astute observers of human life, of human nature, of human interaction. That's, I think, why a show like that lasted for so many seasons and had so many poignant moments throughout the many years that the show was on the air. Well, the show was being made. It's been on the air ever since. But so, we need to overcome the resistance to feeling pain, but that comes from doing these assessments, to realize that while we may feel some emotional pain in the short term, understanding it gives us an opportunity for growth that will make us more resilient, and that will better enable us to have goals in our lives that will really help us meet or help us live the life that we want to have. That's really the key. Okay. So once we've done the assessment, and especially the initial assessment, which is oftentimes the hardest, then we're in a position to say, okay, I know where I've been. I know where I'm at right now. Where do I want to be in the future? Okay. Now, it's the where do I want to be in the future that what most people think of as goal setting. But goal setting is the entire process, because you can't set goals without knowing where you've been and where you are. Okay. You can say, I want to go to Hawaii. Okay. Unless you're in Hawaii, then you say, I'm already in there. Okay. But let's say, you live here in the continental United States. I want to go to Hawaii. Okay. Great goal. How are you going to get there? Well, you got to start with, where am I now? Right. You say, well, that's a ridiculous example. Okay. But it's true. Can't get to Hawaii without knowing where you are now. And by the way, where you are now and your ability to get to Hawaii will in part rest on where you've been. Have you ever been to Hawaii before? Do you have the resources to get to Hawaii? Do you have the ability to survive, if you will, in the climate of Hawaii, which is oftentimes hot and humid, right? All of these things become part of it. So we can't cut ourselves off from our past and make goals in a vacuum, because the goals will end up not being particularly relevant. And perhaps more importantly, they won't do their fundamental job, which is to entice us into doing the hard work that's necessary for meeting the goals. Okay. So people talk about SMART goals, and I'm, I off the top of my head, I can't remember what the SMART stands for. Okay, so I'm going to look this up real quickly. So, okay, so yeah, here we go. So SMART goals are goals that are specific. They clearly state what will be done and who will do it. Measurable, progress can be measured. Achievable, they're realistic and attainable. Relevant, okay, they make sense and they fit into purpose, and they're time bound. There's an actual set deadline for them. And they say, okay, well, if you have SMART goals, then you're in good shape. Well, except that in order to create those SMART goals, you need to have done the assessment, because otherwise, how do you know that they're smart? Okay. How do you know what needs to be done? How do you know whether it's realistic or attainable? How do you know if it fits into your purpose? Okay. And by the way, that's why the SMART acronym was created, was because it's one thing to set a measurable goal that's time bound, but what I've seen is people will set measurable goals that are time bound. I want to earn $100,000 by the end of by December 31st, 2025. Great goal. But okay, is it realistic and attainable? Does the goal fit into your purpose and fit into your values? And if the answer to those two questions is no, it's very unlikely you're going to achieve that goal. And that's just the reality of it. Okay. And you're not going to know those two facets unless you have done the assessment. And so when we talk about advanced goal setting, we start with the assessment. Then from there, and I've talked about this previously, and that's why I spent most of the show talking about doing the assessment. From there, we need to break our goals down into two categories. Okay. One is, all of a sudden I went up on the term. Conditions. So they were first introduced to me as conditions of satisfaction. That's what my friend Jeffrey Hazlett calls them. As a result of my assessment that I've been doing this month, okay, I'm starting to call them conditions of success. Okay, because satisfaction sounds like settling to me. Okay, and I want to be a successful person. That word resonates with me better. Okay. So there are conditions of success and there are goals, and they serve very different purposes. So I'm going to talk about goals first, I think, because they're easier to understand. So a goal is a SMART goal. Okay. It's very specific. It has a deadline. It's measurable. It's attainable. Okay. It's realistic. However, it's finite. Okay. So I had a goal to travel to all 50 of the United States. Okay. Once that goal is done, it's done. Okay. I can never unvisit one of the 50 United States. The goal is done. It's done for all time. Okay. Now, I could set another goal, which I have, to travel to all 7 continents. Okay. Because I've only traveled to 3, North America, Europe, and Asia. So I still have South America, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica to go. Okay. Now I have a friend, Bob Sanders, who I think he's already met that goal, right? That was a goal he had. No one can ever take that away from Bob. He will always, for all time, have been to all 7 continents. Okay. And he doesn't need to repeat it because he's done it. Okay. That's different than a condition of success. So when I look at an earnings goal, for example, okay, I could set a goal each year for what I want to earn. Okay. But that's not really what it is. I have as a condition of success earning a certain amount of money each year in order to support a certain lifestyle, in order to facilitate my being able to do certain things, especially for other people. Okay, so my goal isn't to make a certain amount of money for a certain period of, within a certain period of time. It's to have a sustainable income, for want of a better term, that allows me to predictably live a particular life. That's a condition of success for me. And the fact of the matter is, and sometimes I'll meet that condition of success, sometimes I won't. On average, if I meet it, that's been good. Okay, because the other thing is, when it comes to earning a living, a lot of factors aren't in our control. Okay, there are economic factors. There can be a recession, and that can impact us. And the fact of the matter is, we might not be able to meet our income goal for that particular period, that year, for reasons that are beyond our control. Okay, but then the next year the economy may come roaring back and we do even better. If we average things out, it's like, okay, on average, condition of success, I'm where I need to be. And that's a much better way, at least for me, of looking at goals. Okay, so I encourage you to separate your goals into ones that are discrete. Once you've achieved them, you've achieved them. You don't need to do it again. Okay, and conditions of success that are really what you want to be achieving on a regular basis in your life, that allows you to live the life you want to live, that supports the vision you have for yourself. It supports your purpose and your mission. Okay? Now, goals will support your purpose and mission too in some ways, but probably not in as meaningful a way as conditions of satisfaction. So, let me give you an example. Let's say you want to be a millionaire by age 30. Okay? And so let's say you're just out of college, you're 22 years old, and you set a goal. I want to be a millionaire by the time I turn 30. Okay, and let's set your birthday as June 1st. Okay, so by June 1st of my 30th birthday, June 1st, I want to have a net worth of $1 million. Okay, let's say you meet that. Great. Okay. And let's say 3 months later, the stock market tanks. Okay, well, you met that goal, but now the goal needs to be met again. And is that really what you meant? Did you mean, I want to have $1 million by this date, but then after that, it doesn't really matter? Probably not. Do you see what I'm saying? So having a net worth of $1 million is really a condition of success. And it makes more sense to gauge where we are in terms of how successful we view ourselves on this sort of ongoing continuum-like basis. Okay. That also, by the way, helps us when we do hit those times in our life where there are conflicting situations. Okay. Maybe we have a parent or a spouse, God forbid, or child, really, God forbid, right, who needs our care and support. And that means moving away from focusing on professional success as much as we did before. And that may result in, not making our income goal for that year, or our net worth dropping below where we want it to be. Does that mean we're less successful? I would argue the answer is no. Because if one of our conditions of success relates to closeness of relationships, and by the way, I'm developing a way to on a numerical basis almost assess how close our relationships are. I'll be sharing that in a future show. If we have to divert our attention to taking care of a friend or loved one, I'm sorry, a friend or family member, loved ones, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not successful during that time period. It would appear to me to mean that we, how success is defined for us during that period is different based on our conditions of success. Okay, because we can have conflicting priorities, if you will, within conditions of success, meaning that they allow us to give and take between emphasis on our conditions of success as we go through life, especially as we go through different stages of life. Okay, and this is important because we need to have that flexibility, unless we really only care about one thing, unless we're, Scrooge and all we care about is making money, at least until the ghosts visit us, right? And then we realize there's more to life than making money. Okay. So that's how I recommend you think about goal setting. And if you want to get more into the weeds of SMART goals versus conditions of success, or what was previously calling conditions of satisfaction, I'll put the link to that show that I did a while back in the show notes for this show, so you can go back and watch that one, and get more information on those. I don't want to duplicate it here, because I don't think it's necessary. Okay, so if you really want to get into advanced goal setting, okay, start out with an assessment. If you're already doing assessments, great. So you only have to assess presumably from the last time you did an assessment. If you've never done one before, pick a period of time that you're going to assess your progress. Okay? 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, probably not more than 5. And figure out, what are the areas of my life that I want to assess? Here's where the 3 pillars of attainment can help you, because it gives you 3 pillars: self, relationships, and pursuits, and 9 realms, 3 in each pillar, to use as a guide to assessing your life. That is what it's there for. There's nothing sort of genius about this. It's just, it gives us a framework within which to work, so that we can ask ourselves the questions we need to ask in order to really get a good sense of what's important to us, where we're at in our life, where we want to go. Okay, so do that assessment, and then from that, figure out, okay, what is my purpose? In other words, who am I? What is my mission? What do I want to do? And then how do I construct conditions of success and goals to support my getting ever closer to an ideal meeting of my purpose and my mission? Okay, are we ever going to absolutely fit our purpose? Like, here's my purpose, glove, hand, perfect? No, we're always going to be growing into our purpose, especially since our purpose may change from time to time. Are we going to meet our mission and be done forever after? Hopefully not, right? As we fulfill more aspects of our mission, hopefully we'll see that our ability to accomplish things grows, and so the scope of our mission grows. Okay? But to have the framework, those are the 2 documents there that you see. This is the 3 pillars of attainment, and then below that is my purpose, mission, conditions of success, and goals. Okay, then we have that framework within which to make our assessments, set our conditions of success and goals, make our assessment, set new conditions of success and goals. Okay. Now, our conditions of success, after a certain period of time of really getting to know ourselves and figuring them out, they're probably not going to change a whole lot from year to year. They're going to stay pretty consistent because they're a reflection of who we are and what it takes for us to view ourselves as living a successful life. So then what will change is the bottom line. Well, I don't have my bottom line goals, my annual goals on that document behind me. That I keep that on my bathroom mirror version of this that I read each morning. Okay, but your goals will change each year, but your conditions of success probably won't change very much or very often. On occasion, I know I changed my conditions of success this year, but this is the first time I've changed them in, I think, three years. So it wasn't a huge change. It was a way of looking at a particular aspect of my life that is more in concert with my purpose and my mission. Okay. So that is advanced goal setting. And really, I can't encourage you enough to engage in this process. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Drop them in social media if they're general. If it's something individual where you don't want it shared with other people, I respect that. My email address will be in the show notes after this episode post. You can always feel free to email me, or you can direct message me, say through LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. Happy to engage with you on this. I don't have to give my qualification that I'm only going to respond if it's within my scope of professional practice, because this is something I've been doing now for a long time. And presumably you're not asking me something about, becoming a lawyer or something like that. But hopefully whatever you ask me will be something I can respond to. I won't have to refer you to somebody else. But this is the time to do it, so that, like planning your day the night before, when January 2nd comes around, you're able to hit the ground running and have a great 2025, or if you're watching this in 2025, a great 2026, and on and on and on, right? So thank you so much for joining me today. As you can probably see, this is really one of my passions. I've been a goal setter at least since I was a Cub Scout. So I was 7 years old, I think, or 8 years old. And very, very passionate about this topic, because I know how it's helped me in my life. And I think it will help you as well in your life, becoming ever more the person you want to be. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow, especially, by the way, the people who joined me live, there were quite a number of people who checked in at least part of the show live. I really appreciate it. It's so fun to see the numbers go up and down as people tune in. So I really appreciate you doing that. That's just so terrific. So tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time is my show, Jiggers' Place. And we're going to be having a cocktail, as we always do. In this case, it's one I made up with the help of ChatGPT, called a Blossom Elixir. And our topic is the pursuit of beauty and what that's all about. This is another passionate topic of mine. And I think it's something that is a lot of people seem to be very confused about. And so it will be a great topic of discussion. And as we head into the end of the year holidays, there's so much beauty around us. I know when I walk through Beverly Hills, they have Christmas carols playing from loudspeakers. It completely changes the experience of walking around the city. Stores are decorated. If you're in New York, there's the classic windows. I think it's at Macy's or whatever that decorate for Christmas. You're saying, why is the rabbi care about Christmas stuff? Oh, come on. It's so beautiful. People are in a great mood, are much more likely to be in a great mood than they were before. So we're gonna have a cocktail and talk about beauty again tomorrow, Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So I invite you to join me at Jiggers's place. Next week, on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, is my show Trust and Estates Weekly. My guest is Kevin Quinn. Kevin is the president of the Independent Trustees Alliance, and this is an organization that promotes professional and independent trustees. And I think you will find, especially if you're if you're involved in estate planning, in trust or probate administration, this is an organization you're going to want to know about. And Kevin has been in it for a long time. Look, how could someone named Kevin not be a great guest, right? Okay, yes, you're right. I'm a little bit, prejudiced about this. Who could possibly know why? But in any event, please do join me on Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific time for my talk with Kevin Quinn of the ITA. And then on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is Business Lessons from the Military. And I'm going to be talking about another classic military book, von Clausewitz's On War. Again, a classic military text from which we will sift out business lessons to apply to our professional practices and organizations. And then, of course, a week from today, we'll be back for the next edition of People Making Money. So one last time, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate it. And wishing you a wonderful rest of the day. And signing off as I always do, Marie, you are my belle, darling. Courage at all times, my friends.